There's been something on my list for a while, and this is the topic of Magic Find. I never really had a place or a time and opportunity to talk about it back around Heart of Thorns' launch, well, because it was Heart of Thorns launch, but I did actually make a lot of progress playing into the system very recently, and, well, as recently as about 6 months ago, and I think I've had a fair amount of time to assess its real importance on the game. This is an interesting system, something that, had I not really invested an awful lot of gold and time into, I don't think I would have felt very comfortable talking to you guys about, but I wanted to give you guys the skinny, the details, as to whether Magic Find is really something we should worry about, something we should think about, something we should work towards as players. I think a lot of us, especially in those early days when we first make our accounts, we obviously see our Magic Find dinging a lot, and it's one of those systems that should feel very rewarding, and you're kind of like, yeah, I'm making lots of progress, and obviously everyone's considered pushing it that bit further. There's always a point where eventually you're like, should I keep going or not? Not too many people talk about it these days because it's quite an old system, but I've only really got to grips with it over the past 5 to 6 months or so. So, what can I say? Well, I originally maxed it out on stream. I think I had around 140 to 160% just from generally playing the game. I got to that level, and getting that level is very easy, really, just through salvaging stuff whenever I played, right? Being an active player, I would salvage my blues and my greens, which is the primary way of getting Magic Find. I'd get these little luck items, and I could pop those as consumables, and voila, slowly it grew. From about that point, though, it really stalls, and it really slows down. It depends on the kind of content you play as to what point you're going to really feel that big stall. I think some people might even hit it around 200%, people I've played with in my guilds. I really came to a point where I was like, wow, I'm basically never going to see my Magic Find get much higher than this. The system basically doesn't exist anymore for the kind of play hours I put into the game unless I seriously go for it. And that's the thing, did I seriously want to go for it? Now, honestly, if it hadn't been for the stream and something interesting to do on the stream and to show off and to test out with people, I probably never would have done this. Why? Well, because I don't like the thought that I could hit the cap of 300% or get almost to the cap of 300% and then forevermore never care about luck in Guild Wars 2. You know, I could have been playing this game for years now, and especially about this time last year, Arenanet were doing a lot of rewards for living world instances and small updates and festivals where you complete an achievement or something, and the only reward you'd get from that was, oh hey, here's some legendary luck, right? Like an essence of legendary luck. And I didn't like the idea that forevermore, whenever I salvaged a blue, whenever I salvaged a green, that would count for nothing anymore because I'd be at the 300% cap. But, on the other hand, maybe that didn't matter. Maybe it was a cooler thought to me that eventually, over the rest of my days playing Guild Wars 2, I was slowly, gradually going to be getting more and more loot, more and more wealth, and it would trickle up and up and up. Kind of similar to how I felt when I got my power infusions, when I went for stat cap. And, you know, plus 5 power on an infusion that's all so expensive, really on its own doesn't count for much, but if I thought about every little auto attack I'd ever do again and how it all would slowly build up, it kind of became a little bit exciting. So anyway, I made the decision to go for Magic Find. Really, at this point in the game's life, you had about 3 methods of acquiring it. Number 1, yes, was the luck from salvaging stuff, and good luck maxing it purely through this. That would be an awful lot of playtime. I don't think anyone's actually managed to do that. Maybe some really heavy zerging world versus worlders can talk about that. You had ectoplasm. Arenanet were really smart, actually, tying the Magic Find and the luck system into Ecto. Ecto's like their core material in terms of trading. It always needs to have value. It always needs to be swapping hands. It ties into a lot of different areas of the game. And by tying the ectoplasm to luck, i.e. if you salvage Ecto and destroy it, you can get lots of luck out of it. By doing this, Arenanet kind of ensure that Ecto will always have value. If Ecto price falls too low, then people are going to buy it en masse just to spam their luck up by salvaging it all, and then once again it has value, and then that once again feeds into all the other economies like rare weapon crafting and so on. So Ecto was another good source, but the best one by far, this was before the most recent Halloween I was doing this, was trick-or-treat bags. Trick-or-treat bags were really interestingly tuned in that they spammed out Magic Find for you. Lots and lots of luck was acquirable through these things. And even though it had been a long time since the previous Halloween, I was doing this just before an event came around, there were still a lot of them in the economy. Why? Because there was also a very dedicated associated farm with acquiring trick-or-treat bags, that being the Maze Bomb farm. So you had a really cool thing, actually, one of my favourite things of supply and demand that the Guild Wars 2 economy's ever had, where you'd have the people doing the Maze Bomb farms to get the trick-or-treat bags, who would sell it to the people who wanted to buy the Magic Find to open them up, who would then generate more Maze Bomb, who would sell it back to the farmers who would use it for their dedicated farm. And everybody won! And it introduced like this cool gathering concept, this cool like traditional MMO feeling. You know, go out and gather, and your specific farm is earning you specific money for doing it. It was interesting. Anyway, when Halloween came around, they nerfed this. They removed it. They changed your acquisition of Maze Bomb, thus inflating the price of trick-or-treat bags, and they significantly reduced the amount of Magic Find that you get from trick-or-treat bags, and it's really not a viable method anymore. It's not as cost-effective as it once upon a time was, and you're probably looking at doing it with ectoplasm, which is a little bit pricier. Buying ectoplasm in bulk, salvage down, sell the crystalline dust you get, open your luck, and then use the money you got from the crystalline dust to buy more ectos, slowly getting less and less ectos each time you go back through the trading post. So how did it feel? I got to 300%. As I say, I really only did it as a big motivation for the stream. When I first managed to bump it up, I will say I did feel a difference. I don't think you can take an anecdotal moment like that, though, and prove that this means Magic Find is worthwhile. Obviously, over time, there's going to be swings and roundabouts. Sometimes you'll be more lucky generally than times you're not. So what's more important is that you assess it over a long period of time. My first assessment of it would actually be that the community in general underappreciates the power of Magic Find. Right? When you ask your random guy in-game, hey, is Magic Find worth it? Or you ask someone on Reddit, or you ask someone on the official forums, a guild member of yours or whatever, and you say, hey, is it worth going for Magic Find? In general, your answer from people is going to be far more dismissive of Magic Find than it actually deserves to be. Now, don't get me wrong, all right? There's a very logical reason for why people dislike Magic Find, okay? And the main reason for this is that it contributes to very little. Magic Find affects principally, and little else, the loot you get from drops on mobs. And that's about it. So, for example, yesterday I played quite a while just trying to get my guild missions across 2 accounts, trying to get all the little personal rewards or the favor for the guild and so on. It took a long time. And I came out of that play session yesterday actually with quite a few rares, some exotics, some interesting materials that, you know, the resonating slivers that I could actually sell for a reasonable amount on the trading post. I came out fairly well rewarded. But I would have had all of that, all of those rares, all that exotics, all that stuff, whether I had 300% Magic Find, which is the max, or 0%. And why? Because I got all of those rewards through little bouncy bonus chests in the corner. It wasn't actual loot that I got dropping from those mobs, from, say, the bounties that I did, or the races that I did. All that loot would have been there anyway. Magic Find did nothing for me pretty much all of my playtime yesterday, even though I came out feeling rewarded, okay? And that's not some fringe case scenario. At least one day a week, my playtime in Guild Wars 2 is being dedicated to guild missions, alright? So that's an awful lot of my playtime that Magic Find doesn't affect. And it's not just guild missions either. People obviously don't run so many dungeons anymore, but it was a huge thing in dungeons too, where most of the money you were getting was from a liquid gold reward you get from a bouncy chest at the end of the dungeon. And if not that, mostly the other physical chests you run around pressing F on in the dungeon. None of this stuff was affected by Magic Find. The other thing I've been consistently dedicating a day of or week to in Guild Wars 2 since Heart of Thorns is raids. And raids were in the same position. Raids, basically nothing drops any loot. You spend ages hammering around on a single boss, and the rewards you get aren't affected by it. So it's obvious why people are so dismissive of Magic Find, and they have a very good point, alright? It contributes to so little. What's the worth in it? Now, after I did actually manage to max it out to 300%, I decided to play into this. I wanted to look at where I could get the most value for my Magic Find. So, interestingly, in the Silver Wastes, as you run around, one of the primary money-making areas of the game of the past year or so, there are little chests on the ground called Bandit Lock chests you can open with Bandit Lockpicks. And these, opposed to most other chests in the entire game, actually are affected by Magic Find. In fact, there's a buff on the map where, as you are opening the chest, it will buff your Magic Find by like plus 40%, specifically during that window while you're opening it. So in theory, now that I had max Magic Find, if I really played into it, I could go to the Silver Waste and see some benefit, right? And I dedicated a lot of time to this. I not only had my 300 base, but I had 14% higher because of my achievements, and then I went and spammed out a bunch of consumables, pushing myself even higher. I actually got to the point where I had 914% magic find while I was opening a bandit-locked chest. That's pretty high, guys. And did I see any difference? Did I see lots of ascended stuff coming out of those chests? No. Did I see any exotics particularly coming out of those chests? No. Did I see more flat gold? Certainly not. Did I see a lot more materials? Certainly not either. It really didn't seem to make much of a difference. Probably there was one. It was just too marginal to see. So I played into it even more. Funnily enough, another thing that does get affected by Magic Find is PvP chests. Those rewards you get from reward tracks, those actually are affected by Magic Find. This is deliberately designed this way so that pure PvPers have some interest in the mechanic. So I actually farmed a ton of PvP reward tracks, got a load of boxes, filled my entire inventory with them, then cheekily went to the Silver Waste and only opened those PvP boxes while I was in the middle of an animation of opening a Silver Waste locked chest. This was what I called the piggyback technique. This meant I would have 900% magic find while opening the PvP boxes, and you can get a lot of ascended stuff out of the PvP boxes. So what happened once I had all of those opened? Well, nothing either. I basically got like one ascended ring maybe out of a hell of a lot of boxes, and overall it was a pretty sad time. So even playing into the mechanic, it really wasn't very rewarding. And how can I then in this same video say to you guys that I think the community is harsher about Magic Find than it deserves to be? Well, that's because I think of two things specifically. Number one is your perception of your own drop rates and how you can get used to them. Now, I think I'm in a fairly unique position for this, alright? What I mean by this is, for most players, as you gain Magic Find, it's a fairly incremental process, right? You're slowly building it up, especially for the first 100% Magic Find or so. A lot of stuff's still very new to you, and you've probably not been doing too much salvaging anyway. You've not been buffing it. It climbs very, very quickly. So you can quite easily forget what it was like when you were, say, 100% lower. And those early tiers, I actually do feel like you can feel something of a difference. With the way I did it, where I moved so high, all the way to 300% so quickly, and then popped a ton of boosters as well, also really quickly, I could feel a difference. Equally, I feel a difference each time I swap from my main NA account to one of my alt accounts. Now, I haven't been on a free-to-play one for a while, but I have been spending a reasonable amount of time recently because of Zero to Hero on a new EU account that also has incredibly low magic find, and I do really feel it, do legitimately see that change. But most players won't. If you're doing that over several months, and it's too incremental, it's very difficult to see anything going on. I think that contributes a little bit to the bad perceptions people have about Magic Find. It's just as easy to not notice your loot slowly, gradually, consistently changing, as it's not easy to notice, say, the amount of experience you're getting from killing mobs, or the gold find boost that are associated with your account. These are also things that we do slowly get more and more of, and eventually do account to something, but you just don't notice it as it grows. This, of course, doesn't make these good systems, by the way. If you can't even feel the reward as you're getting it, and yet it's putting more gold into the economy, right? It's bloating things. Well, that's obviously not a good position to be in, but I do think the Magic Find has a little bit of worth. And secondly, and I think this is the really important one, it totally depends on the kind of content you play, all right? I gave you an example of what, a reasonable amount of the population is doing at the moment. They're raiding, they're doing the weekly missions and so on. Those people like me, we're not actually getting the benefit of our Magic Find right now. But there are certain places you can go that do seriously play into your Magic Find, okay? If you spend all your time, instead of being in the raids, instead of doing guild missions and stuff, but scaling huge events, all right? Namely in Ore, in the Silver Wastes, in South Sun, or in Dry Top, those maps specifically, you can see huge gains and reap massive rewards out of your Magic Find. Why is this? Well, because in those maps, those more vanilla maps, South Sun, Dry Top, and Silver Waste are a little bit newer, but in these maps, you can scale events very high, get a lot of mobs to appear, and all of those mobs actually do give you loot. It's fairly common now with Arenanet, especially in like the Heart of Thorns maps and those big metas and so on that people have funneled into for other reasons, these tend to not give you so much loot by way of other mobs dropping things. Like, the highest I can really think of is the Chuck Garant, some of those waves that come to attack every now and then. If you manage to tag a lot of them, you can get a reasonable amount of loot. But this stuff does not hold a candle to, say, pushing all the way from the start of Straits of Devastation to the Gate of Arar, doing all of those meta events as you go, all the defenses, all the escorts, with vast amounts of players. In those situations, you'll see massive amounts of creatures come in and fight you. Huge opportunities to tag things, and there you're playing into your Magic Find a lot. There you can pop a lot of your consumables, and there you'll see massive gains, especially combined with the new map bonus reward systems, which help, buff your profits up a little bit more too. The thing is, that stuff, like going in ore and doing those events, that's old, and a lot of the real veteran players, those who also happen to be the ones with 300% Magic Find, probably aren't so interested in doing it, and for that reason, I think Magic Find gets a little bit less of a rap. I did actually do 2 test streams where we did this. We ran around, again, I really tried to min-max on the amount of Magic Find I had, and you really do feel a big difference, but you have to kind of be playing into those types of content, right? I can't see myself spending 6 months in ore doing stuff that I remember grinding and farming on when the game very, very first came out again, but had I spent 6 months doing that, I think I'd be seeing a hell of a lot of difference as the 300 Magic Find guy versus the, the 100 Magic Find guy. So, what does that all mean? I think in general, what it means is you can worry about Magic Find. Magic Find is something to rewarding to go for the first 100% to 150% or whatever you feel is comfortably still climbing for the way you play. Like, if you do a lot of world versus world, if you feel a lot of those greens and blues coming in, if you play a lot of content that gives you luck that then, the luck will benefit basically, then maybe it's worth pushing a little bit higher. But absolutely, I don't think going all the way to 300% is worthwhile. I actually think for your average player, and when I say average player, don't misconstrue me, I don't mean casual player, I really just mean for your average active player, it isn't worth pushing 300% through luck. But I do think it probably is worth using the other consumables in the game to get from 300% even higher. Alright, so I'm talking about item boosters, I'm talking about Magic Find boosters, celebration birthday boosters, the infusion you can get for your utility amulet, hero banners, and then stuff like foods, right? Like chocolate omnom berry creams, the Halloween sharpening stones, like the sharpening skulls and stuff. They're actually huge. They can push you up way more Magic Find, way cheaper, way better, even though they're only temporary buffs, than actually trying to do it through luck. And if you use those, you can make sure you have them popped when you're actually doing the appropriate content, right? I don't need Magic Find while I'm raiding, but I might want Magic Find if I find myself in ore. So relying on the consumables, I actually think is a way smarter way to go, especially with the Trick or Treat bag nerf. I just think it's too pricey to go for 300 right now with too little payoff. Maybe as Season 3 rolls out and we get some new maps, if we see those new maps a little bit loot-wise structured a bit more like, say, ore was, then you may actually see Magic Find's worth grow a little. And that's actually one of the key points I want to express in this video. That's something I think a lot of people don't appreciate. The worth of Magic Find will change as the game changes. It all depends on what the devs are currently funneling us into. And with Heart of Thorns, that's definitely not a particularly favorable place. But it only comes down to the way they've structured the rewards. It will never be a one-size-fits-all, oh, Magic Find is crap, ignore it discussion. Its value is always going to change based on the most contemporary content that's in the game and how it primarily rewards you. Is it through little floaty boxes? Well, then you're going to regret your Magic Find more than maybe in a year's time where most of the loot is once again dropping from enemies on the ground. So we'll see. That's basically my assessment with how it goes. My advice to Arenanet, for what it's worth, would be to get rid of the 300% cap. I don't see why they don't just continue having it climb and climb and climb. It just continues to get exponentially harder and harder and harder. Currently, after a certain point with Magic Find, it stops getting harder to get more percents. And I don't think that's the best way they could have done the system. I think they should have kept making it get harder and harder and harder and harder and just see how high people climb. That would have created interesting posts. One day you might wake up and see on Reddit, some guy has 700% base Magic Find. And it's just like this most disgusting, filthy, ungodly number that you cannot possibly fathom how they've got to. A bit like, that guy who keeps crafting higher and higher, plus 21 infusions and so on. That would have been more interesting for the community. I definitely do prefer the capless design. I think 300% is fairly low. I doubt Arenanet expected this quantity of players to get to 300% already. And so why not reassess that, make the system a bit more interesting in that way. And that's pretty much it, guys. So that's my advice for you. Really focus more on the consumables. Make sure you pop them when it's appropriate. Magic Find is useful. It's far more useful than your average person in-game is going to make out like it is. As for the whole luck side of things, yeah, I would really think about it before you dedicate all that money for 300% when you could put it towards something else like, I don't know, even scribing would probably feel a little bit more rewarding at this point. Anyway, there you go, guys. Thanks very much for watching the video. Let me know what you think about Magic Find. I know it's a bit of an odd topic, but it's been on my mind for ages, and I'm glad to finally share it with you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.